All right, we're just letting people join. We will get started in about a minute. I always like to see all the early people joining. All right, we'll get rolling here. Thank you for everybody who's joined on time. I'm sure we will have a bunch more people joining as we get rolling here. I'm super excited about this webinar. We're calling this Under Attack, and we're going to show a cyber attack happening in real time. So we'll go through our usual when we do these webinars. We try and focus on about 30 minutes of content and get right to the meat of things. Go through our goal with our webinars, as those that have been here before know, is to give everybody kind of a top line view of technology from a more executive strategic level. Understands what's happening, understand particularly from a cybersecurity perspective, the risks out there, and then what they can do about them. This webinar I'm really excited about. We've had the most registrants I think we've had in a few months for a webinar. Lots of interest. I see lots of people joining, which is great. We normally run these webinars on the third Wednesday of every month. And every few months we have special guests join, who I'm going to introduce in a moment. But just before I do that, quick plug for our next webinar. We're doing our March webinar is going to be SharePoint training. So across our client base, across the community, we're seeing lots of questions, lots of folks asking about SharePoint. How can you use it? So this is going to be a combination of executive and user training. So this works well for leaders in organization, also works well for your teams. You're welcome to have as many of your staff join as you want. We can take up to 500 people in our webinar, so lots of people. So if you want to register, you can go to techify.ca/webinars, or you can use the QR code that is up on your screen there. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce our special guests, starting with Nina. Nina's a solutions engineer at Datto, and she's been working there for the last couple of years. She works with all of Datto's backup, disaster recovery, business continuity solutions. She's based out of Toronto. And she works closely with Milos Sukic, who is a channel account manager and also a technology expert. Datto is a great partner, been a great partner of ours for a number of years, and has pulled us and our clients out of varying jams with potential data loss issues, that sort of stuff. So Milos, Nina, welcome. It's great to have you for this webinar today.
Thank you for having us. Great opportunity, and I hope people get value of what we're showing, because what we'll show happens in real life for many companies. And the good news is there's a proper way to be protected, and the Techify team certainly knows all the aspects of cybersecurity. So thank you for having us, Brendan.
Yeah, and I think to give people the perspective, so Milos works with a bunch of different IT companies, and a bunch of different IT companies that support tons and tons of different. So for example, we support over 50 clients. Milos has a bunch of relationships with different IT companies, managed services providers, like us, of course, none that are quite as good as we are, but other ones in the marketplace. And so he's got, both him and Nina see this sort of stuff on scale, and see hundreds of different businesses, and see what's impacting them from a cybersecurity level. And one of the tough things, Milos, we always have with talking to different business owners is this sort of notion of, you don't really, like, yeah, okay, there's a cybersecurity issue out there, but are you just trying to sell me something? Is it really an issue? So part of the reason we wanted to do this was just to show everyone the impact and make sure that they're clear that this is a real threat. And this is something that at the C level, at the business owner level, really needs to be addressed.
It's a very pertinent, I think, important what you say. We see it over and over again. I always tell companies, that I have demos with, that it's clear now that there's two types of companies in this world: people that will get attacked and people that got attacked, right? So we unfortunately live in a world where the cyber attacks keep going up, and we'll never speak again past this webinar and say, oh, there's less cyber attacks. That's not possible, unfortunately. And like, every company at some point in time will be a victim of what you're going to be seeing today. But again, the good news is we're also here because Datto manufactures and supports, the best business continuity solution on the market. We'll get into that a little bit, and Nina will show us the mechanics behind it. But watch closely, and it's scary for sure, but there's ways that we can protect you throughout via the TechifY team for sure.
Yeah, so we're not just going to scare everybody today, but we're gonna let them know what they can do about this, right? The other thing is we advertise this as a real-time ransomware attack, but we're actually going to show what happens with two different attacks. One, sort of the conventional on a server side of things, and then one, what could happen with a cloud system, what can happen with your Microsoft 365 system. So we want to show both of them, and just for some context. What we're seeing and what we're talking about obviously is the ransomware impact is just widespread. Like, it feels like every day we log on and we see all these headlines about different companies, organizations that are getting breaches, big companies, like the companies that should have a level of security should be able to prevent this sort of thing. And the type of breaches are happening all over the place. And then we're seeing stuff hit close to home, right? Just before the holidays, sick kids. It was a victim of a ransomware attack. We're seeing all sorts of nonprofits and charities being targeted, right? Small businesses. I think these hackers are looking at who's the most vulnerable target. And it's really sad that they're going after charities, they're going after nonprofits, and they're going after small businesses because they're saying, okay, who's not going to invest in the right security and the security processes and that sort of thing, and who can we get money from and extort money from, and they're making tons of money. So we're seeing from a data perspective, Sophos State of Ransomware Survey showed that 66% of organizations were affected by ransomware in 2021. That's an increase of 78% over the year before. So 66%, 2/3 of organizations had been affected by ransomware in some sort of way. The average ransomware payment in 2022, according to IBM's cost of data breach, was over $800,000. But that's really a fraction of the cost of ransomware. Like, Milos, you see this when folks have to recover. Like, okay, so if you pay the ransom, which is horrible if you have to pay the ransom, but the total cost of recovery, according to IBM, is $4.5 million, and I'm sure you've seen the depth and the breadth of what somebody has to do when they have to recover.
It's very an interesting point, because people originally, maybe even people on this webinar, think that the hackers are really after right? They want to see their spreadsheets. No, this is not what it is. So you have to understand first that the whole ransomware thing is a business like any other business. So these gangs that run this are actually camouflaged as real companies with employees of the month, most successful attacks, and all of that. So you have to know that it's a whole business, like ransomware as a service, as they call it now. And there was an interesting example here in Montreal. Actually, the metro got the subway system got hit, and the president of that of the subway system said, "Well, it was curious because we only have like BI and spreadsheets about our routes throughout the city and so on." And I was listening to this and I was thinking, these guys really go because of your downtime. So they would do research about your company. So let's say your company does $5 million a year. How much is that a minute that you lose of being down? So that's what they're really about. And even in the case of the sick kids hospital in Toronto, the interesting fact about this is the ransomware gang felt so bad that they gave the decryptor to the hospital because they said they didn't mean to attack it. But what I'm saying is they go after downtime. So they know if you're down a whole day, it's going to cost you X and the ransom's going to be Y, right? So in terms of that cost, there's obviously the cost of getting your data back, but there's also the whole labor cost, who you're going to put to repair this. How much time will that take, right? And then further to this, what they started doing now is they take your data, which they don't even look, but they know it's personal data, and they expose it to the dark web. That's a kind of another aspect of it, right? You don't want to pay the ransom. We're going to put your data on the dark web. So they go very deep, and I'm sure that Brandon, you've seen that across your clientele, all types of different schemas on how to affect SMBs.
Yeah, the ransomware, it's a good point, because the trends with ransomware, it hasn't gotten better, it's gotten worse, and the additional dimension has been added. So it's not just locking up and encrypting files and stopping anybody from working. There's also the threat of releasing that data and releasing it out to the public, which in personal health information and stuff like that, the cost, the concern, the risk, all that sort of stuff is brutal. One more, well, I got two more kind of stats. One from the first half of 2022, of all cyber insurance claims, 34% were ransomware related. So obviously prevalent. The source, according to Statistica, was what probably we all know. The biggest source is spam and phishing emails, these phishing emails coming in, followed by poor user practice, gullibility, lack of cyber security training, which you could probably put all three of those into the same category. Like the most, it's going to be email bound, it's going to be phishing related, it's going to try and trick people, and that's what we're seeing. Milos, when you look at across the businesses and client base that you look at, is there a specific industry that's kind of more at risk than others?
So we really see it across all industries, across all sizes. The reason why is it's now clear that a typical SMB, if they're in the construction sector, finance, architecture, all of that you see on the screen, they're basically targets. And the reason why they're targets is because a classic SMB today is just not equipped to deal with this landscape, right? I'll give an example, like for example, Techify, Brandon, you use tools that are not available to the general consumer, right? That are only sold to IT firms to help you, not be in that reactive train and really be proactive about this stuff and spotting, attacks before they occur. But as you can see, all sectors of the economy are touched by this. And you might wonder, okay, but what about, public companies or like even like government institutions? We see it all day. It's very bad in the school system and in the hospitals and so on, because in that case, they know that they can be down and they usually pay the ransom fairly quickly. right? So this is just to illustrate that no matter what industry you're in, you're not you're not left apart by these, kind of hackers or malicious actors. You will see that happening across all industries. And really, I've had discussions and demos with end companies throughout the years that I'm here, and there's no really written rule if they're going to go after one or another. And if you're interested, you can set up like Google alerts for ransomware in your area, and you'll see every day there's someone that's hit, right? And I think that that's the real strength of Techify, is to be able to have a process and we'll speak about that in a minute, I'm sure, but they have an assessment so you guys can know what your posture is in terms of cybersecurity, so you don't become the next statistic up on this screen. Brendan, can you guide us a little more about, how do you help new customers that come to you from various industries?
Well, I think we're gonna get there, and we'll talk at the end. And I see somebody's already put in a question in the Q&A panel, which is great. If anybody has any other questions as we go along, please put them in the Q&A panel. We'll make sure that we get to them at the end of our webinar today. And we'll go through. I want to spend some time after. I want to make sure that we get to Nina, because she's the real brains of the operation here, and she's going to show us what happens when an attack happens. One more point I think we wanted to make, Milos, is just on the sophistication, or I guess really the lack of sophistication of small and medium-sized enterprises, and why a ransomware attack is a big deal.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. And this is a very simple metrics that I guess every SMB, in my opinion, needs to know, right? If you don't know what your tolerance to risk is, you should definitely find out. And, Brendan and his team can help you out. But many organizations, and I've seen organization over 1,000 employees that have no clue what their metrics are, right? And we're simply talking about two simple metrics: RTO, which is T for time, which is how much time can you be down, without affecting critically your company operation. And the other one is how much data can you lose before it becomes critical, right? And this has been a very, very popular terms in the cybersecurity space. And the reason why is because we had to find a way to kind of quantify this for companies, and further going to this, if you don't know these metrics at all for your company, there's a very easy way to find out. We even have a tool here, Dado, that can help you out do this. But and once you know these metrics, then you're very well equipped to put the measures in place, because many people don't know these metrics. So they don't know, okay, if I'm down today, how much time will it take to, for me to recover, from that kind of attack? And like, what's my objective? Do I have to be up in 2 hours, or is 24 hours fine for me, right? And I think that this is the beginning of you knowing your tolerance to risk. And you have to understand too that a DR plan is like insurance. You didn't have to have it back in 1973, but you need it now, right? So all that we're talking today, consider this just as another rider on your insurance. Like, go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because no business really understands the impact and how much downtime they can actually sustain until they deal with it, right? And a lot of times there's not even kind of the thinking about, like, is it okay if we lose an hour of data? Is it okay if we lose 24 hours of data? What if we lose a month of data, right? And understanding that is important. And I've just put up a poll, so we get a little bit of audience participation, and I see a lot of people are already answering. Nina, you'll be happy to know that almost everybody on this webinar hasn't ever seen a ransomware attack happen in real life. Thankfully, only 18% of the folks that are on this have actually worked for a company that's experienced or suffered from a ransomware attack. So that's good. So we can show you what can happen, and then we're going to show you how to prevent it moving forward. So now, without further ado, Nina, I'm going to pass it over to you. Show us what happens.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks, Brendan. So yeah, like Milos was talking about before, I mean, there's two types of businesses, ones that have been affected by ransomware and ones that will be. And so with us here at Datto, we're really in the business of making sure that if and when it does happen to you, you're going to be able to recover those systems, not only recover them, but recover them quickly. So let's kind of take a look here and see what it would look like for one of my PCs here to be infected with ransomware, and what it would look like to be able to easily and quickly restore that with a Datto solution. So I have my PC open here and I have my desktop screen. I'm looking and I see all of my files on my desktop. So I received this file as an attachment in an email a little bit ago. I think it was from a coworker, but I'm not exactly sure. I downloaded it anyways because it looked legit. So if I click on this file, I can actually see here that, to my unluckiness, this is a file that has been infected with ransomware. And what it's really done here is it's gone ahead and encrypted the rest of my healthy files on my desktop to this file extension called .WannaCry, which means that I'm no longer able to open my files anymore, and they're holding them ransom. So they're going to basically prompt me to pay $300 worth of Bitcoin to this address. Nowadays, I see this number being a lot more than $300, but basically they're telling me that we're not going to let go of your files and give them back to you until you pay this money here. And that's not even really a guarantee, right? I could pay that money and they could still kind of hold on to it and maybe keep asking for more or hit me again later down the line. So really, we need another method to recover this, because we don't want to keep paying these bad guys and kind of have this keep happening to us and just keep kind of hoping that they'll give us our data back. So luckily here, this machine that I'm working off of, this Windows 10 PC, is being backed up by a Datto appliance. So the Datto appliances are, again, our full business continuity solution, which allows us to take full image-based backups of our infrastructure, so our servers and our PCs, to the appliance itself. And once we go and we want to recover any of our servers, so let's say anything, again, gets hit by ransomware, or even, the hardware just fails on it, we have the ability to virtualize any of our backup points on the Datto appliance itself from any of our previous backups that we took and get back up and running right away. So this machine that I was just infected with, that I was just up on before, luckily, again, it's being backed up by one of my Datto appliances, and we have the option to launch what's called a local virtualization. So we can see here in my recovery points that I've been backing up this machine every hour. So luckily, I can go back to 1 p.m. or even 12 p.m. if I want to, and bring up that point, and I can continue working off of there and get rid of that ransomware file and kind of get back to normal and basically have it so like that attack never happened at all. So if I click this Start Restore button over here, it's just going to prompt me to set up a few more things on my end. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this virtual machine. This virtual machine is going to be an exact replica of what that previous machine was that I was on at this backup point. So that's this noon backup point. So it's going to be exactly what this machine looked like at noon. And that way I can actually bring this up and continue working off of this like that ransomware attack never actually happened. So you can see how quickly this is already booted up. So this is exactly what that machine looked like. And now all I have to do is log in with my username and password. It's going to bring me right back into my desktop. And we can see here, my files are no longer encrypted because it's taking me back to that noon backup point that I had. So it really took me back in time to before when that ransomware attack happened. So if we go to my desktop, my PDFs are still there, they look good. And what I can do now is I can go and actually use my malware software to go and actually delete this file and make sure that no one ever clicks on it again. And that way my files are safe and I can continue working. And of course, hopefully no longer download any bad stuff in the future.
So Nina, you're showing a desktop. So if somebody's got a computer and it gets encrypted, this is the same situation if a server gets encrypted or if multiple computers across a network end up getting encrypted, right?
Exactly. So the great thing about Datto and our solutions is that we're able to protect, desktop servers the exact same way. So no matter what kind of machine it is that you're looking at, again, even if it's someone's personal computer at the office, or even if it's a server running multiple workloads, we're still going to be able to protect them, back them up, and restore them the exact same way. So even if that ransomware attack hits on, your most critical server at the office, we're still going to be able to bring that up just like we would a desktop computer.
It's actually a very interesting point, and what you guys have to, I think, primarily understand here is that there's two types of data protection solution. There's classic backup, or there's image based or disaster recovery. And the reason why I'm speaking about these two differences is backup is simply take a copy of my files, put it in some cloud, put it somewhere, right? And business continuity is to be able actually to virtualize the system as it was. So just like someone took a picture of it at a certain point of time and bring it back. Why am I speaking about this? Many of you guys on the call here have probably 2, 3, 10, 20 terabytes of data throughout your company. So let's say that you only had backup, you did not have that data. To download 5 terabytes of a corporate network, you'd have to tell your employees to go home for a couple of days, right? So the process, which we have here with Datto, is really to eliminate the downtime and to not only to have a copy of your data, and there's a bunch of other security measures that allow you for all types of other recoveries. But my point is, this is much more than just backup. So for you guys sitting on this call and they're like, well, I have backup. Sure. But have you ever done the exercise of recovery, DR testing? What happens if you get hit tomorrow? Do you know the metrics, the time it takes to put you back online? And from my 15 years experience in working with professional IT firms, very few SMBs know these metrics. And further to that, almost no one has ever ran a DR test because they don't have the means to do so. So I think that's really important, and that goes a long way in terms of preventing these attacks and being proactive rather than reactive.
And I think, Milos, the other piece that we wanted to talk about too is, okay, so somebody could look at this and say, well, you know what, I understand my desktop can get infected with ransomware, but I've got nothing on my desktop and I've got everything in the cloud. So I no longer need to worry. I don't need to worry about that, right? And this is an image of the managed services agreement that Microsoft, that probably anybody that's using Microsoft 365 on this call, you've agreed to this. And we've highlighted a part here that talks specifically about backing up your data in Microsoft. Why is this important, Milos?
So this is actually crucial, right? So I was involved with Microsoft 365 since the very early BPOS days, and then BPOS became Office 365, and Office 365 became Microsoft. And early in the BPOS and Office 365 days, everything was backed up in different data centers. You had redundancy and all of that. And all of a sudden, Microsoft, being what Microsoft is, they started buying companies. So they said, our focus is really to develop the solution, not to protect the users, not in a way, not against ransomware threats or stuff like that. So this paragraph which we will gladly can send you. I'll copy the URL in the chat while this webinar is going on. But this actually says Microsoft is not liable for any disruption or losses that you have, right? And we recommend that you make regular backups of your data using third parties, apps, and services. So what they're saying is have a third-party backup, like, you know, Techify has all their customers. I don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, but like you cannot just, you guys just don't get an Office 360 or Microsoft 365 seat without backup for that reason, right? So
Yeah, you need to be backing up the data, and we wanted to show our second type of intrusion here. So we're gonna play a video. Milos, maybe you can talk through as we're playing this video, what's happening here.
yeah, so basically this is an attack that was presented at one of our events by Kevin Mitnick, which is a well-known, you know, hacker, and now he has his own penetration testing company. So what he does there, he goes to a third-party site to send a malicious email. The funny thing about this is he will actually send this to the user, and the end user will see it as just a Microsoft email that's updating spam filter settings. So as you see, the email that opens here looks very legit. Normal user would just click yes. It will ask you to re-authenticate, which is normal. So a regular user says, yeah, it seems about right. They need to read my email and so on to protect me. So they click on it. Once they click on it, it's game over. What I mean by that is he can view their contacts. So he can view you guys as contacts and attack these contacts the same way he attacks you. And he can send email as you to anyone in the company, any global address lists, contacts, or whatever. He can send emails there. But the most scary of them all is this ransom cloud. So as you can see here, he enabled ransom cloud. What that means, it encrypts all the emails. Notice something that's interesting. He leaves the subject line intact. Why? For you to know which emails you missed. And at the end, you get that email that says your emails have been encrypted, pay Bitcoin to this address. And now these ransomware gangs have started to being, they try to be real nice. They even give you a call. They say, hey, if you need help with the payment, we'll help you out. You know, we're nice guys. We just want to be paid. So the reason why we're showing this is I think that the biggest misconception in IT today, one of the biggest ones, is I'm with Microsoft, they protect me. That can be further from the truth. In matter of fact, Microsoft, their only responsibility in terms of your Office 365 is for you to be able to log into it, right? Past that, what your user does, the deletions and everything like that, they want to distance them from that responsibility. And the easiest way you have to think about this is a Microsoft recommendation. And the link that we were sharing before, 99.9% of organization will, when they create a new tenant, they click next, never read it. And I speak with tons of end users and I get this reaction a lot of time. Hey, Milos, what do you mean we don't have native backup with Microsoft? Further to this, I'll drop another link in the chat. In this chat, Microsoft has released their own ransomware guidelines if you get hit on Microsoft 365, right? What do you do? And guess what the first step is? The first step is to verify your backups. So we're here as Dado and Techify and telling you it's not our recommendation, it's the manufacturer's recommendation. So just follow that. It's a service that's, you know, very important. And we showed the mail here, but just to be clear, it also protects SharePoint. It also protects Teams, shared mailboxes, the OneDrives, and so on. So the integrity of your productivity suite on Microsoft 365. And I'll close with this. There's about 1.1 million tenants today in the world on Microsoft 365. 85% of them don't have backup because they're not aware of that Microsoft clause. So don't be in that boat is basically what I'm saying.
It reminds me of the days like I remember when I joined Tech 15 years ago, we used to have to convince people to have offsite backup, on-site and off-site backup, and then people started losing massive amounts of data and stuff like that, and realized the impact of it. So now, like the cloud commercials have always been, oh, put your stuff in the cloud, never worry about anything, it gets backed up and everything's great, and that sort of stuff. So thank you, Milos. Thank you, Nina, for both those demonstrations of what can happen, how you can get hacked, what the impact, what it looks like when you get hacked, that sort of thing. The last piece that I just wanted to talk about today is we've spent most of our time talking about what do you do when you get hacked, right? Your last line of defense is that backup, right? Being able to go back, as Nina showed, go back an hour ago or 4 hours ago or 12 hours ago and restore from backups. But I always say, what's the best way to deal with a hack? Prevent it in the first place, right? Like ideally, if we can not have to, like Nina, it's amazing what you showed, but I'd rather not have to do that. I'd rather just the ransomware doesn't get on our systems. And the message that we spend so much time delivering to people is so often IT teams are very reactive focused, right? There's an issue, it disrupts somebody's work, they solve it, and then they just keep going on in their day, and the same issue keeps on repeating itself over and over again, and we get in this reactive cycle, right? So maybe somebody's email account gets hacked in Microsoft 365, go in, reset the password, check the logs, make sure nobody's accessing anymore, log out all the devices and stuff. And then we just kind of, the IT team or the IT company or whatever just goes on about their day. And the problem is this stuff, like the risk keeps on getting worse and worse, right? The sophistication of cyber criminals keep on getting worse and worse. So to us, this is the real key for how to prevent this sort of stuff from happening. When there's an issue, when it disrupts work, and there's a solution, we create what we call a best practices standard. So when we see something like email compromise, we say, okay, what can we do to prevent that compromise? Like everybody's heard of MFA, multi-factor authentication. Well, as things change, all of a sudden we have an ability to use things like conditional access that restrict logins to certain devices, so that even if I have a user that clicks on a link that puts in that email and password on that ransom cloud system, they're not going to be able to get into that account because they're not authorized on the device. And they're not able to access it. So we create these different best practices standards. Backup is another one, backing up cloud environments, right? We want to make sure we have a continual process of identifying where is there a risk, right? So the next challenge when you have best practices, like let's make sure that we're backing up the cloud environment. Let's make sure that the servers and any desktops that have data on them have image-based backups that have incremental, that you can go back kind of like a time machine, like Nina was showing. Let's make sure that that best practice is in place. And then the challenge is identifying the risk, identifying where you're not aligned with these best practices. And what we've seen is this is not something you can do once every 4 years. It's not something you can do once every year. We find this is a process that needs to happen on a cybersecurity perspective every month on an ongoing basis. We believe super strongly that every business needs to be audited, reviewed, and aligned against cybersecurity best practices. And then the risk of being out of alignment with those best practices needs to be measured against the business impact of that risk. Like what happens if you're misaligned with those cybersecurity best practices? What's the impact if you get ransomware in your business? And then that's how we see developing really good technology strategy, really good cybersecurity roadmaps. So because all of you wonderful people have joined us today, we're offering a cybersecurity risk assessment. So what we can do, if you go use your phone, use the QR code here, fill out that form online, And then what we'll do is we'll contact you and we'll schedule a risk assessment where we'll go through with you the key parts that we see in your organization from a risk perspective. Obviously, for the clients that are on the call here today, we already have deep knowledge and insight and information about what the key risks are, and our techification team has been auditing your environment and looking for risks, and we can go over and review those with you. For folks that are on this call that are not clients of ours, this is an opportunity for us to spend some time with you and give you some immediate impact. There's a bunch of questions we can ask that we will ask that give us a better idea of your environment. It's not a really technical exercise because we know based on the type of technology you have in place, the type of applications, the cloud technology, how you're being supported, that sort of thing, we can give you a sense of the risk in your environment. And then that gives you at an executive level kind of an action plan for what you can do about it. So last thing that I just wanted to do is provide contacts. So my contact information, feel free if you didn't get a chance to fill out the form or would prefer to email, send me an email, brendan@techify.ca, or you can give me a call at that number there. Milos and Nina's contact information is there as well, in case you have any questions. And as a reminder, please put into the Q&A panel any questions you want. I see we have a few here. So I think we've got time for a couple questions. And Sarah just said thank you. Appreciates all the information today. You are more than welcome. Welcome, Sarah. Milos, Nina, you're okay to stick around for a couple more minutes and answer a couple questions?
Yeah, I can answer these, starting by the first one. How do we get access to dark web, right? It's a very obscure subject because it's very well kept, and most of the general public have no clue how to do this. It's just a buzzword to them, but it actually uses a untrackable protocol, I would say. So like there's no really real human identity when you access the dark web. It's accessed through a special browser. I'm not an expert in any way, but it's to the latest I know, it was accessed by a browser called Tor, and on there's a market for everything you can imagine. Like people are buying and selling things that you didn't even think they were available to sell. So it's really horrific, I think, what you'll
ransomware, hitmen, various nefarious activities.
People, they actually sell, believe it or not, they sell people. Second question, will this
just before Milos, just before we go on from that question, the other piece of accessing the dark web, or there's a bunch of different services out there that can allow you to monitor what's going on in the dark web, and there's monitoring services that will actually tell you if your password, so if there's been a data breach and anything with your company domain name in it has been included in that data breach, if it's posted on the dark web, if people are buying and selling your credentials. So you hear all the time like different services getting hacked. There was a Reddit hack recently. A few years ago there was a LinkedIn one. There's like all these services. What happens and you have small websites that maybe you have a username and password, you sent flowers to your wife for Valentine's Day, or husband, and I didn't get flowers, I sent flowers, and so you log into that company's website, but that's a small business and they don't have tons of security on their website, so it gets hacked. And what the hackers do is they'll take all those credentials and they will then post them on the dark web and sell them. The whole idea is that those credentials, somebody's probably reusing a user and password across multiple websites.
It's very true, and I've seen an example of that in Quebec where they ransomware the public bus system, and the next day you could buy the president's daughter's bus card to take the bus in the city, like the next day, right? So it travels fast, definitely.
Yeah, makes sense. The next question that we had is, will this presentation be made available after the webinar? Yes, there are always on-demand versions of our webinars that are available. So you can log in, same webinar site if you go to techify.ca, and you can click on the training tab on our website and see webinars. We also upload them to YouTube so people can see them in the future. So I think we've got a couple more questions we can answer here. The next one was, what happens if people take data? So if you get encrypted with ransomware and then that data is downloaded. Well, that's a kind of a big problem. What we always say, it goes back to how your data is protected in the first place, right? And so the more security that you have in place, the better off you're going to be, right? So Milos, basically the answer, if you haven't done anything to protect your data, you get encrypted with ransomware and somebody takes your data, there's not much you can do about it.
No, there's not much you can do. The only thing that I think you need to look for, of course, is that leak to the dark web with the professional tools that Brendan, you were saying. And the other thing is really, you need to focus to determine how much data you lost, and your last recoverable point is on what time. So you actually know what's your last point where data was all clean, right? Unfortunately, once that data is downloaded, we kind of lose control of it, because like these ransomware gangs are not traceable to an individual most of the time. So you need to focus on moving forward, making sure that you haven't lost a ton of data, which Datto can help you with. But it's all about being conscious of what we spoke and putting the measures in place so that you don't lose a lot of data, whether they took data or not. At some point it becomes outside of our control. We need to focus on putting the business back up and running and making sure that the last clean point is very close to the point of the attack, right? So you don't lose days of data.
Two things I'll add. One is, if they do take data and you believe that it's going to be exposed, dark web or otherwise, there are various privacy laws that that you need to make sure that you disclose that data has been lost. And looking at Privacy Commissioner website for Ontario or for Canada, or talking with legal counsel, is super important. The other piece, if you could roll back in time, what you would do is look at policies and best practices. So we talk about best practices. One of the best practices is something called data loss prevention in Microsoft 365. So you can create security for your documents so that even if somebody steals the data, they can't access them. So here's an example, an Excel document. I've got all my customers, right? We've got 50 plus clients. Names, addresses, email, primary contact, how much they're paying us, whatever. Maybe I have it in one Excel document. That document would be horrible for it to get out, and for anybody else to get it. So I put security on it, and I say the only people that are allowed to access it are people at X level at Techify. So somebody steals that Excel document and downloads it to their computer and goes to open it, it's going to go and check with Microsoft 365 security. It's going to say, is this user allowed to access this document? And then it's not going to allow them to open it. Sort of like putting a password on a document, but at a much more advanced level. Okay, I think we can do, let's see if we can do two more quick ones. One was about staff training. Staff training is a best practice that needs to be in place. We did a webinar a few months ago about how to train your staff. to make sure that you protect as one of the best practices to protect against getting hacked. There's some really good stuff out there. There's a bunch of different companies that do great training. The one we recommend is something called Fin, and it allows you to basically, I just did my training this morning for our company, actually. They're 3 or 4 minute training sessions that are kind of fun, a little bit quirky, not boring. And it creates that awareness with your staff. And then you get a report and a dashboard on a monthly basis of who's done training, who hasn't done training. It also test fishes staff. And so it allows you to see who's being phished, who's clicking links, that sort of stuff. There's a bunch of different options on that front. So that's the training. And I think the last question is it difficult to prove that I've been hacked and thus not responsible for fraudulent purchases? Wait, Milos, do you want to take that one, or you want me to take that one?
So I can take it. So there's it's actually a very interesting question. I live in Quebec here, and Quebec is the first province in Canada that adopted a law against data breaches and attacks and like cybersecurity hygiene. And it's coming to all the provinces in Canada, some kind of an iteration of GDPR in Europe, right? Where this is being legislated here in Canada to separate the, what's your responsibility, what's not. Further to this, there's something very important in the technology world today that's called cyber insurance that can actually clean out some of these clauses and determine whose responsibility is on what, depending of the measures you took, right? So for example, if you're working with Techify, they make sure that to get that form from your insurance and make sure that, they check off the boxes. They dealt plenty of times with this, but there is, to answer your questions, there's a way to prove, like if you show encryption and so on, but that legally non-responsible for it is dealt through things like cyber insurance, right? Which is something that many companies to this day don't have yet. And I'm sure if you wanted to have a chat with Brandon about why that's important and what his other customers are using, he'll be more than happy to do it. And cyber insurance in DR is, like I said before, did not need to have this in 1984, but ever since 2013, the first crypto virus that hit, now you need it. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Where, like, our experience, anytime there's any sort of hack, whether it's just an email hack or a broader compromise, you do see signs and you can prove things. So you can see logs within Microsoft 365 of access and logins and stuff like that. As long as you have in your environment proper logging in place, which again is a best practice to be able to log user interactions and admin interactions and stuff like that, so that you can see and you have that transparency, and then you can do that investigation should there be an issue. Okay, that is we've gone slightly over time, but it's been great. We had a ton of questions. I hope everybody really enjoyed those demos. I enjoyed the demos. I thought they were great. Milos, Nina, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody that joined us today, thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.